I understand that you have a problem with two of my employees. It is true that they killed one of your associates. It is possible that they acted rashly. But on the other hand, there was provocation. The man was selling on their territory.
I didn't want Tony Soprano with the little puppy. I wanted a guy who was shrewd, smart, non-arrogant, but was 3 steps ahead of everyone else, who could blend, who seemed to be one person but was another. The Mandalorian.
The structure you are trapped in will be razed in short order, and your storied lives will come to an unceremonious end.
What do you propose?
Reasonable negotiation.
You have something I want. One of my favorite lines, because you can use it in life. You see someone you emulate, you see someone who's really in their own skin. I always observe older people who have nothing to prove. They're living their life, they're comfortable in their own skin, and that's what I want. Moff Gideon is a very complicated guy, and I love playing him for a number of reasons. One is he's smart, and he wants to affect change within this particular galaxy, and he's unable to. He thinks he can get it from outside. Such a mythological story when everything you need is inside you. But he feels like that child, Grogu, who he's after, has some DNA that's going to change things for him. Possibly would change things for the world as well. So I play him in the first 2 seasons as if maybe he is trying to right all the wrongs of the universe and the galaxy and the world that he is in by being in charge. But he knows everything and no one knows how. So he has a particularly strong network of intel, which is great. But what does he really want? You don't really know, except for the child. I think that part of my success is to play villainous characters with a human touch, who are very astute and very aware of themselves and the world around them. The Darksaber was a wonderful thing to wield. There's only a few of us actors who've had the opportunity to wield such an iconic piece of equipment, sword. So for me, there were many that I had to work with a wonderful stunt actor who was in the suit doing the stunt work for Mando, and I just, the whole story behind my first big saber fight was that the stunt guy came out and he was 20 years younger and a really small guy, and I looked over at John. I said, "John," and he went, shrugged, and I got in the corner. And I started to work on this fight because I knew I'd have to do every single frame for it. It looked believable for a guy of my age fighting Mando. We had a bunch of different swords. Sometimes the hilt, sometimes a long one, sometimes one that was lit around the end so they could sort of CGI it in. And sometimes it was full weight, sometimes not full weight. I chose the ones that had a full weight because I felt like when you wielded it, you had to see it, how it hit something. It was very, very important to me to have it be really believable. So I had practiced at home, because I also have a cape, to figure out the logistics of it with a broomstick. And eventually when I got with the Darksaber, I was just very enthusiastic about being able to practice with it in the moment, on the set, and to have such a great time playing this character with a piece of history that's so very iconic. Breaking Bad. I was inspired by a stage direction that Vince Gilligan wrote called Hiding in Plain Sight. And when I read that stage direction in the script that they asked me to do, I was fascinated. I was invited out to do a guest spot at the end of season 3 of Breaking Bad, and I said yes. I was very excited when I read that stage direction because I started to think about who do I see from my window who lives next door or the apartment next door across the hall. What do they really do? Hey, Gene. Hey, Harry. Like, you cordial conversation to the elevator, but what do they really do? Who are they really? And I got obsessed with that idea.
Lucy, you must remember to have the salt and pepper shakers wiped.
Okay.
Can I help you, sir?
Diet Coke, please.
And 5 minutes of your time.
So I did it one guest spot. I got off the plane. They were calling to say, would I do another? And I said yes, to continue the investigation. I did another guest spot, and they offered me a contract, and I said, let's wait, because it was the end of the season. Let's see what you're thinking about for next season. And they called next season and repeated their offer, and I said, I'd love to speak to the creator, because I wanted to do something different. I felt like, okay, they've had their villain of the week, and now they want a formidable villain to play opposite of Walter White, Bryan Cranston, who he was brilliant in that show. But I didn't want to sign on unless I was going to do something that was atypical. And so I had to figure out what that was. So I say now to many people when I lecture at colleges and universities, and I'll tell my children, ask for what you want. And so that was a perfect example of me asking myself what I wanted. And so I asked to speak to Vince Gilligan. We had a long conversation, and we were on the same page. And things took off after that.
You have failed. Now it's left to me to deal with him.
You can't.
If you try to interfere, this becomes a much simpler matter. I will kill your wife. I will kill your son. I will kill your infant daughter.
I enjoyed learning from the process of masters at work. Vince is a wonderful director, but I was there, I think, when he first started directing on Breaking Bad. He had done a show prior to that where I believe he directed. But to be able to direct your own vision is to take matters in your own hand and really feel and see the whole story. So I was with him at a time where he directed a television show, and at a time where he extended that direction of shot-to-shot television to filmic, visionary movie every week. And so I felt honored to be there. One episode that really stands out for me, well, there are a number of them, but one in particular is Box Cutter. I come from the theater, and so to me, Harold Pinter, there was a thing called a Pinter pause, where you leave space. Sometimes that space is an interminable amount of time, but it allows you to refocus and it gets your attention. And so I thought of this when creating Gus. So for me, my contribution was, I realized, can't mess with the words, they were good. How do I slow the timing down? How do I slow my timing down? So I can hear more, so I can be contemplative, so I can allow space to affect me. And so when someone would say something to me, I wouldn't answer right away. I would really hear them, study them. And it unnerves people. I mean, I realize if I don't answer, I just look at you. What's going on in your head may be, did I say something wrong? Am I stupid? Oh my God, is he going to kill me? What's happening with him right now? Does he have a pulse? And so I use that in combination with my breathing practice of yoga to allow me to just drop down. And it was a wonderful experience for me because it helped me to realize that the best actors don't do anything. You don't have to do anything. You got to think it. But in thinking it, you want people to see it. So you have to think it and project it, and it'll be there. A wonderful experience in my career and changed my life. The Boys. The Boys, Stan Edgar is a company man. And what makes a good villain is he's working for somebody else. We think what makes a good villain is he wants to take over the world. And I have some of those in my, Star Wars Moff Gideon life. But when you have a guy who is a company man, it's scary. And so Stan Edgar frightened me a little bit because he has no fear. He has no fear of Homelander. You're in a world where you have superheroes with human emotions who could kill you in a heartbeat. And he's like the head of the company who has created this compound V. So he has business venture.
I don't think I see the point, Stan.
The point is that you are under a misconception that we are a superhero company. We are not. What we are, really, is a pharmaceutical company. And you are not our most valuable asset. That would be our confidential formula for Compound V, which you, man-child that you are, released into the wild.
Bam! You get the idea of big business, of big politics, of big government, how it affects the world. I love this show. The way it happened was completely in a way, an accident. I ran into Eric Kripke, who also was the writer of another show I did years ago with Jon Favreau. And so I ran into him at a studio in Canada when I was doing another show. And he looked at me and took that step back and scratched his head and looked me up and down. After we were, "Hey, how are you? What are you doing? What are you doing?" And I said, "Eric, I know what you're thinking." And he said to me, "Well, if you know what I'm thinking, would you?" And I said, "Of course I would. I love working with you." I said, "You're not going to be able to make a deal. When that day comes, text me, because they're going to be talking to my people, and I'm not giving up." And he said, I said, "Text me." And that day came. They tried to make a deal, going to make a deal. Eric texted me. I said, "Eric, come on. You did exactly what I told you to." And I was in.
Eventually, probably soon, the world will recognize you for the pitiful disappointment you are. You are not worthy of my respect. You are not a god. You are simply bad product.
They say that daughters need the validation of their fathers and that sons need to be mothered. And so what did we miss in our lives? What did we miss growing up from that relationship that we needed to be validated by? So Stan Edgar realizes that Homelander's just a big kid and that he never got the validation that he needed from his father. And so it becomes very, very tricky. He understands that. So he needs to be validated by another man who says, "Yeah, you're powerful and good," and all that. In return for that, Stan also feels like he's holding on to his power. He's able to control this loose cannon where no one else can. You are not a god. You are simply bad product. It's strong. I say that to myself all the time. My ego gets out of line. I'm just bad product. Better Call Saul.
Look at me. From now on, you are mine.
Big decision for me to make. I felt like I was going to the same dance, and I hope I didn't stress anyone out at Buena Vista Productions or Vince. But I felt like it was I didn't want to go back in my brain. I was like, I can't mess with that guy. Guy is done, man. He's history. You know what I mean? He's iconic. I don't want to. I don't want to mess with him anymore. And then I was sitting there with Vince, and I went, "Okay, what's the name of the show?" And he said, like, "Better Call Saul." Who starred in it? Bob Odenkirk. Boom. Bob's genius. But I went, that's your place. You are part of an ensemble, and you're here to do, if you choose to do, very much what you did in Breaking Bad. But then I went, no, don't choose that. Choose to surpass that. So what are your obstacles? I mean, all this was in my decision process. What can you do differently? How can you create a different Gus? It's before the time period of Breaking Bad. Okay, so he's more volatile. He's less controlled. All these things went into the basket, and I said yes.
Adding more product will threaten the reliability of the entire operation. May I ask, did Donnie Ladio approve this? I approve this.
And so my work had to be even more subtle than in Breaking Bad. And so that became a challenge, to figure out how to grow to be the edge in Better Call Saul and to figure out how to lend to these two shows being bookends. I contest that if you watch Breaking Bad first and then Better Call Saul, that's great. But if you're able to watch them backwards, Better Call Saul first, and then Breaking Bad, you'll be illuminated in a different way. I felt season 6 of Breaking Bad, I had a chance, as subtle as it is, to reverse all of what I thought I would be locked into. You got a chance to see a different Gus, because I realized, end of season 5, into season 6, you had a Gus who was more vulnerable because there was a threat there. Lalo Salamanca. And I didn't want him to be a threat because Gus is formidable. And because of what the events of, at the end of Breaking Bad, in a way, I'm going into Saul thinking I'm Machiavelli. So how do I allow myself the vulnerability to have a chink in my armor? So one scene in Breaking Bad that you saw, I don't know if it was episode 9 or 10, where I'm on the elevator, Johan directed it, and he noticed. I'm standing on the elevator, I'm totally still, and my hands are by my side, and all you see, just tapped my finger. He caught it. I did this to see if anyone would catch it, standing there. Completely calm, stoic, right? But that one little tell. And he said, oh my God, do you know you're doing that? I said, of course I do. He said, I have to get that. I have to get the camera down there. I have to get that brilliant, right? That one little thing. The work is sometimes, in a way, silent and very, very methodical, and also it's very keen. And so everything came together in those moments. And in season 6, Gus's turn in 6, which, you know, if you haven't seen it, I don't want to have any spoilers, but you really sort of see him come out of his shell after the threat is disposed of. So you get a chance to see an arc that I think is well worth it and well deserved to watch this season 6 of Better Call Saul. Do the right thing.
You're going to pay now, you're going to pay on layaway.
Yeah, we know where that is.
How much?
Been here 30 years.
You've been coming in here at least 3 times a day. What are you, a It's $1.50.
Yo, stop, put some cheese in that motherfucker, man.
Extra cheese is $2.
$2?
Yeah, $2.
Hey, you can forget that shit. Yeah.
Bugging Out was a journey, and I so enjoyed working with Spike Lee and Do the Right Thing because it was the first time that he really had an opportunity to explore on a very deep level the differences between us culturally in a neighborhood setting. And to me, it was the perfect balance of who I am, Italian and black. And so to create Bugging Out, I really had an idea that Bugging Out meant well, but he was that man who wanted to be, in a way, a revolutionary, but he had no tools. He didn't have the education to carry things out the right way. So in his little way, he wanted to create some kind of change. So Afrocentric, completely, and energetic, and ready to call you on your faults if you're Sal in the pizzeria. So I had this idea that he was a loose cannon because he didn't have the poise or the charisma or the expertise to really think it all the way through. And that allowed me to have someone who could be, in a way, slightly a pest, but still someone who was pressing for equality on his own street-level way.
Mookie!
So you know I'm still...
What? Come you got no brothers up on the wall?
Man, ask Sal, right?
Hey, Sal, how come you got no brothers up on the wall here?
You want brothers on the wall? Get your own place. You can do what you want to do. You can put your brothers and uncles and nieces and nephews, your stepfather, stepmother, whoever you want, you see? But this is my pizzeria. American Italians on the wall only.
Well, I think that I love the scene in the pizzeria, where Bugging Out just, he wants to get his pizza and he wants some extra cheese. Put some extra cheese on that. And Sal is like, resistant. And the attitude that Sal had with Bugging Out was because he was a pest. But then when he looks up and he sees Sinatra and Perry Como and all these people, he's wondering why he's not represented there. And what does that mean to him? And it triggers something inside of him. Those are very volatile scenes in many ways because of what happened at the end of the movie between myself and God bless him and rest his soul, Danny Aiello. The Jordan scene was an observation of what Spike was seeing in his neighborhood and what he was afraid of.
Yo!
There's a song called Who Stole the Soul? He was afraid, I think, maybe I contest that he was seeing the soulfulness of his neighborhood go away because of gentrification. So that scene to me was great fun with Martin Lawrence and all the wonderful actors in that scene. John Savage, to be able to say, you don't belong here. What are you doing on my block in my neighborhood on my side of the street? I mean, it's just such great dialogue. Spike is a genius in terms of how he wrote that, but he also is a genius in how he translated what he was seeing. And he was ahead of his time because you go out there now and it's completely gentrified and very, very different than what it was when we shot the movie.
You are Italian, you are black, right? Did you have to navigate any feelings of allegiance? And what was that conversation with your father like after you saw the film?
In this particular case, I remember the conversation clearly because he was disappointed in the movie. And we knew we had done something that was going to make a difference or at least open people's eyes to the issues that were presented, but also have them be entertained. But he didn't take to the movie because he thought there was Giancarlo is too much cursing. I said, excuse me? It's mother this, motherfucking that. It's too much cursing. I said, well, no, what's the point of the movie, right? So I think he missed a part of the point of the movie, which had me realize I wanted to talk to him about living in this color skin because we had the same blood. And I don't know if I ever really impressed upon him enough that my life was so different because I carried this skin. My papa thought the movie was visual, but didn't understand the issues at hand. And I was surprised because they related to his life as well as mine. Godfather of Harlem. To me, it's a wonderful honor to play someone who has lived, and it's also a huge responsibility. Adam Clayton Powell Jr., who I portray in Godfather of Harlem, really lived and really made incredible strides for African Americans during the 60s and beyond. He wrote the Powell Amendment, which was essentially the Civil Rights Act. And so he, through his relationship with Lyndon Baines Johnson and JFK before him, was able to implement and resist, as LBJ said to him, take out the Powell Amendment and I'd have this thing passed. But he wouldn't do it because the Powell Amendment was the majority of the Civil Rights Act that we have today. So to me, I would be haunted in my dreams if I didn't get that right.
Who's the first?
The first what?
The first Italian numbers banker you're going to enter into the congressional record.
Well, how the hell do I know?
You promised the congregation one Italian a week.
Why is Jack Kennedy playing possum with my identity to the civil rights legislation?
Adam, you're evading. Now, as much as I hate to admit it, you hit a nerve with that sermon. And some people put names in the suggestion box. You're going to have to name names.
Well, who'd they put in the suggestion box?
That's the problem. No one named any Italians.
And so I read a lot of his record. I listened to him and the cadence of his speech. When I first saw him, I thought, this guy is white from Georgia. He kind of talked like that, really, he was from New York, lived upstate and came to Manhattan, preacher at Abyssinian Baptist Church. You may know some of his history. But for me, the wonderful thing about him was not only that he was a genius lawyer, but that he was also someone who enjoyed life. And this took some of the pressure off me to always be as serious as I would want to be in my life and in my work. I learned through the legacy of Adam Clayton Powell Jr. that he was able to have fun. He married Hazel Scott, eventually loved jazz music. He smoked, he drank, yet in Sunday morning he was in the pulpit giving the sermon of his life. He was also a great orator and statesman. And when you think about an orator or a statesman, you wonder how they get their point across and people really are listening and really hear them, because it's a God-given gift to move people from one place in their consciousness to another. And Adam Clayton Powell did that. So for me to play him was my honor. Every season is a different year in the history of our movement, and it really is a show that's about Bumpy Ellsworth Johnson, so brilliantly played by Forrest Whitaker, about his journey in affecting African Americans in Harlem. So Powell was a new Johnson, didn't agree with his politics, but knew that he was a helpful figure in Harlem. The show is about Bumpy. It's about morality, again, about a guy who's selling heroin to his own people, is also a slumlord in some ways, but someone who cares about his people and will do all he can to protect them. Bumpy Johnson was not your typical gangster. He was someone who tried to and succeeded in struggling against the Italians for their hold over Harlem. And so the black market, no pun intended, is something that's really actively still going today. And so that is a help to the people in certain neighborhoods because there are certain things they can't get or afford otherwise. And so that intricate market is explored not only in the world of drugs, but also in the world of politics. Kaleidoscope. I'm very proud to be a part of this show. I stepped in to this show after having done the final season of Better Call Saul, and I had to move quickly to jump in and feel as if I had enough time to apprise myself of all that was going on in this particular heist story. It's based on a heist that took place during Hurricane Sandy that really happened during a hurricane. $70 billion in unsecured bearer bonds were stolen in this city.
The moment we come in, the temperature will start to rise. And once it gets above 73 degrees...
We're fucked.
Life in prison. Got it.
Yeah, we can get by everything else, but not that.
Unless you've put in a back door. Did you tell them you put in a back door?
I put in a back door.
They sent me Glue to read for the first time, and I read it, and then I got Yellow, and I read that. And then I started to realize that the structure with which they had planned to release it was not going to be the same. I.e., when I read scripts, it's 101, 102, they're all numbered, up to 8. This was orange, green, blue, pink, yellow, white, and it was all connected. So for me, I was hooked because it gave me a chance to show many different sides of myself that you haven't seen. And to me, that's an actor's dream. I love this piece because, again, you can choose the order with which you watch it. So you asked me, how did I feel about that structure? I was hesitant. Hadn't been done. How are they going to know? How are people going to know where they're at? They're all colors. And people still, even today, after the show has been released, they talk about, did you watch it in order? Well, there is no order. Did you watch it in chronological order? There's that word again. There's no chronological order, which gives you the opportunity to have your imagination run wild and your visual match up with that by trying to figure out the story. It's a heist drama. There's something left for you to do. It's to figure it out. And as you're watching, you can't but help, as being a human being, is to want to figure it out. Like, wait, did you see that? What just happened there? That won't get reflected until episode Yellow or Blue. It won't link up to White, which you should watch last. I think the whole idea and structure is brilliant. And the ability for them to pull it off by all of the connections that are there when you watch it a second time and you see the connections you missed the first time, no matter what order you watched it in, you will be intrigued.